Released by Capcom in 2005 on the Nintendo GameCube and PlayStation 2, Killer 7 would be an on-rails action game that switches between third-person action and first-person shooting. Written and directed by Goichi Suda, also known as Suda51, he has stated this game is his proudest achievement as it utilizes dark and mature themes in a stylized, hard-boiled noir setting. For story, the game features a professional assassin with unique powers named Garcian Smith, as he is joined by 6 other assassins forming the Killer 7 group. For gameplay, players explore a variety of levels across 7 missions using on-rails movement while solving puzzles and killing monsters called Heaven Smile. Players can move and shoot, but not at the same time, as shooting is done in the first person apart from third-person movement. Each assassin has their own unique weapons, special abilities, and stats that can be upgraded, and there are 2 additional gameplay modes that are unlocked upon beating the game. The story only gets larger from here, so let's cut it down to signs with a recapitation. As the game begins, it's 2011 as we see a sharply dressed assassin named Garcian Smith walking down the street, long case in hand, as he passes by another man named Christopher Mills, who slips him a discreet assignment. Garcian arrives in front of the Celtic building, a hideout for a group called Heaven Smile, and is instructed to take out everyone and capture their chief alive. He's warned of the group's oddity, as when noticing a security camera, from its perspective, Garcian changes into an entirely different person instantly. The new ill-tempered assassin is Dan Smith, who takes out a person who quickly mutates into a demonic Heaven Smile. He is aided by a maid named Samantha, who monitors his progress, and the ghost of a man in a red bondage suit named Iwazaru, who warns him of the tight spots ahead. He's also given insider information from the ghost of Travis Bell, and is helped in his missions by a motley crew of dangerous and unusual spirits. The volatile Heaven Smile come in many shapes and with many abilities, with a preference for blowing up alongside anyone nearby, as they continue to slaughter everyone inside. Smith can not only speak to dead spirits, but switch places with any of the other 6 members of the 7-member Smith Syndicate. Each member sports their weapon of choice, as Dan wields a revolver, Kaede uses a scope pistol, Khan dual wields automatic pistols, Mask uses grenade launchers, Kevin throws knives and turns invisible, Coyote can pick locks and use a custom revolver, and Garcian keeps the team together alongside using a suppressed pistol. Smith intercepts a carrier pigeon from someone named Johnny to a person named Amir, noting the team's strength may be useful at an international level. Johnny discovers that Garcian is the leader of the Smith personas and somehow can resurrect them if killed. However, he also suspects someone else is behind Garcian calling the shots, and knows the Smiths switch using the dial of a special television. Passage to the boss of the building is blocked by a gatekeeper who only takes soul shells as payment, and beyond, Samantha helps wheel in the hidden Smith and true leader, Harmon Smith, as he dismisses her and moves ahead. Smith is greeted by a doll-faced girl with white wings called Angel, proclaiming they are fulfilling a divine mission by ridding the world of gods unwanted. In response, Harmon takes out his armor-piercing rifle and blows off her wings, exposing her demonic side, though her wings are soon clipped. In the office beyond, Harmon isn't fooled by the illusion presented by the man behind it, as he's greeted by Kunlan, who acknowledges they have been clashing for over 30 years, laughing while gathering power in his hand. Harmon shoots at him, and catching the bullet, Kun is sent flying all the way to the next building unharmed, where he replies the world has become so small, declaring it's only going to get smaller as the day when laughter leaves the world draws near. Stepping back, we learn that on July 3, 1998, all international disputes were resolved as all countries came together regardless of race and fought terrorism together. Agencies were set up worldwide for order and security as humanity joined forces to stop international, ideological, and cyber terrorism, and one such measure towards that goal was shutting down all air transportation and closing every media network station. In 2002, an intercontinental highway was built between east and west, crossing the Atlantic Ocean, and in 2003 a massive distribution center the size of a city was built on the ocean as well. All research on nuclear energy was banned, and all existing radioactive waste and materials were disposed of. Focus turned on destroying all intercontinental ballistic missiles, which was accomplished by launching the missiles outside the Earth's atmosphere and intercepting with other missiles to detonate them. People gathered to watch the world's largest fireworks display, thinking the missile shows were a symbol of world peace. However, terrorism would simply take a new face, as later at the signing ceremony of the UN's 2003 World Security Treaty, terrorists called Smiling Faces attacked. As normal police and military were helpless against the attacks of the Smiling Faces, they turned to the one power that could counter them: godlike professional assassins, the most noteworthy among them being the group known as Killer 7. We now see Garcian going to meet Harmon in his Seattle trailer house as he hears muffled screams coming from somewhere, and observes Samantha in casual wear, slapping around Harmon while he's unconscious and irritated at running late to her college class. However, when the lights turn off, Samantha suddenly turns into a quiet, obedient maid, while Harmon wakes up and informs Garcian he senses an old acquaintance of his is threatening to bring down the whole country. Should Garcian encounter them, he is to call for Harmon immediately, and Garcian obeys. The lights turn on again as Harmon goes back to being comatose, and Samantha returns to her impatient self as Garcian pays her for her usual assistance. Meanwhile, at the Department of Defense in DC, officials are suddenly alarmed to discover over 200 ICBMs have been launched from somewhere and are headed to Japan. They immediately call the president to authorize intercepting missiles to blow them up, and later Mills informs Garcian of a missile strike against Japan while handing him his next target. Killer7 is to go to DC and assassinate the middleman between the Japanese UN representatives and the US government, Toru Fukushima. This order comes from multiple government divisions as they feel Japan has turned against them and are watching their reaction as the US president has 18 hours to decide whether to intercept the missiles or not. Garcian isn't thrilled to work in the middle of a hotspot area, and Mills says if he needs, reach out to a well-informed man named Kasai. Arriving at Restaurant Fukushima, Luchador Mask the Smith takes point as his raw power creates an opening and he boldly declares his intent to meet and kill Fukushima. Surprisingly, everyone there is also at Heaven's Smile as he blows them away with his dual grenade launchers. Within, Travis informs him he's not the only one after Fukushima, as Japan is controlled by the UN Party, so if someone were to take out the UN Party, Japan's minority part, the Liberal Party, would take over. He also mentions Japan has no defense system, so its very survival depends on the US, but currently, the US considers Japan a burden anyway and not worth saving. As Mask suplexes heavy debris in the way, he encounters a chef in the kitchen splattered with blood. Panicking, the chef fires at Mask, who just headbutts the bullet out of the air, and saves the chef's life anyway. The chef mentions how everyone has turned into monsters, and Mask spares him, though Iwazaru finds the sushi chef awfully suspicious. Afterwards, Travis explains the International Ethics Committee is also getting involved and has their own dangerous assassins, who are after the Yakumo Party Cabinet Policy Documents, or Yakumo for short. He adds that Fukushima's last ace is the Yakumo, and leveraging it at an upcoming conference may be the only way to save Japan, though the power of the document could even allow the US to rule the world. Harmon takes control as he meets with Toru Fukushima in person, and Toru greets him graciously. He explains he wanted to become a politician to make a difference, but found it instead to be a stage full of actors playing politics. He asks his secretary Julia for some refreshments, though when she returns, she assassinates Fukushima herself, turning to demand the Yakumo from Smith. Harmon wheels away as Travis shares Julia was sent by the Liberal Party, noting that using a woman as a weapon is something only an inept party would resort to. He spits on rotten politicians while pointing out there is no gender discrimination in assassination, so she needs to be taken out like any other obstacle. As the restaurant is consumed by flames, the assassins square off in a rapid-firing contest as Julia loses and shoots back that Yakumo destroyed their country, detonating an explosive in her necklace, taking her own life. Mission accomplished anyway, Garcian decides to meet up with Mills' contact Kasai, who says Garcian now needs to take out Jean de Paul, a sushi chef at Restaurant Fukushima, who is actually an elite spy from the International Ethics Committee. Meanwhile, a small meeting takes place between older UN party members who lament the impending doom of Japan and blame it on the youth, while a young member named Matsuoka is tired of hearing it. The older men mock Matsuoka and hand him a gun, daring him to kill them or himself because it makes no difference, and cracking under the pressure, Matsuoka kills both men and turns to kill himself too. Suddenly, Kunlan appears next to him, stopping him, and with his powers reanimate both old men who continue to belittle Matsuoka. As Matsuoka is confused at the situation, Kunlan reaches out and grabs him with his god hand, twisting his mind as he suddenly rises with a fierce determination instilled in him. Arriving at the Kaku building, Smith enters through a hidden doorway as Travis informs him this is Information Terminal Central, where the world elites met and debated the fate of Japan. In the end, the talks resulted in no country arguing in favor of saving Japan, and neighboring countries were instead more eager to seize her territory afterwards. He then mentions DePaul's goal is to disrupt the final talks between the US and Japan, which could delay the destruction of the country. Mask confronts John, disappointed to fight someone he's saved, though is quick to deliver a swift burial. The final talks take place between 4 delegates over a game of mahjong, though mass cheating leads to a breakdown in negotiations, escalating to a Mexican standoff, and resulting in mutual self-destruction. Travis relays to Smith that the talks broke down, and while this is going according to plan for the US, he wonders why the US simply doesn't destroy the UN party, and suspects someone else behind the scenes. The most likely candidate would be Matsuoka of his Central Management Office, also called Matsuken, who is perhaps picking up where Fukushima left off in league with wanting to rule Japan. Moving on, the spirit of DePaul lingers, still impressed with Mask, and shares that Matsuoka has the Yakumo, and indeed believes he will change the world and Japan will rise from the ashes of this disaster. Beyond, Smith faces off against the resurrected old politicians, blowing both of their brains out once and for all. Afterwards, Garcian checks in with Mills as they watch the ICBMs pass overhead, sealing Japan's fate, and Mills remarks it's concerning how used to this they've become. On TV, we now see a live broadcast from Andre Almeida, a young CEO also promising salvation to those that follow him, ejaculating in excitement when an explosion destroys a stadium full of people behind him. In his Texas Broncos shirt, he proclaims a new faith he started and then directly challenges Garcine by name to find him. As Garcine returns to his trailer house, he walks in on and watches Samantha have sex with an unconscious Harmon, offering to indulge Garcine too when she's done. The lights turn off, but it's to awaken Harmon as he informs Garcine he senses trouble to the south, and Garcine confirms it to be Almeida down south in Texas. Tracking him down, Garcine finds an entire city centered around Almeida, with the residents within zealously devoted to him. Iwazaru shares there is power in Almeida's afro, and Travis elaborates that Almeida is a young president of a megacorporation, while Smith notices this town is also inhabited by Smiles. After Mask pulls an entire gas tanker by himself, they collect Almeida's bottle cap figurine line, and Smith hears from the spirits of lingering cultists how Almeida set up the new Thanksgiving holiday, celebrating when Almeida cast the One Ring into the fires of Mount Doom by himself. Moving on, Smith also runs into the spirit of Julia, the assassin he killed, and she says she finally feels free of a life where she wasn't in control, thanking him and passing on. Talking to the locals, the people here are actually not thrilled. Almeida brought in a bunch of odd smiling strangers and took over the town, as Travis finds the work of the company, First Life, doesn't equal its success. Approaching Almeida's HQ, even the front security is unsure of what happens inside the building, and as it turns out, there is no building, and instead the whole mock-up is a giant cutout that tumbles over, revealing a trailer. Within, Smith is greeted by Almeida, who admits there is no such thing as First Life. Rather, he just runs commercials, finding that the average person indeed blindly judges books by their covers. Wearing an insulated suit, he confesses he made his fortune by injecting himself with dozens of deadly diseases, overcoming them, and selling the vaccines. However, before taking on Heaven Smile, even he feels it's in a league of its own. Just in case he cannot overcome it, Almeida wants Smith to kill him if he turns, hearing he's the only assassin who can. Just then, they are quickly surrounded by the US military, as Almeida is seized and forcibly injected with something that creates Heaven Smile. The officer in charge tells Smith that for national security, he needs to forget everything he's seen here, as Almeida gradually turns, telling them he cannot fight the overwhelming urge to kill taking over him. He begs Smith to kill him as he pops off, showering blood everywhere and infecting all of the military nearby. Reassembling, Almeida and his afro ascend to a powerful new form, and destroying the seat of power, the afro, Smith hears Almeida chuckle contently as he dies, raining blood over his town. Later, we see a man in a white suit named Curtis Blackburn kill a prostitute inside his limo as he steps out in front of the Seattle Immigration Building. Flying down the hallways, he enters one particular office and proceeds to kill everyone there, expertly shooting them in the head, before pausing and focusing on a certain young lady there. Back with Garcine, he now walks in on Samantha trying to force-feed Harmon, and waking him, Harmon says he has detected the actions of Curtis, and surprised, Garcine mentions Curtis is the one who killed Dan years ago. Harmon recommends Dan take care of Curtis personally, confident in his success, and meeting with Mills, learns that Curtis is working for the government but is now in some sort of organ trafficking deal involved in the creation of new Smiles, abducting children specifically. Disgusted, Garcine condemns Curtis's actions, moving to the nearby Ishizaka Land fairgrounds where there is a sudden surge of children disappearing. There, Travis mentions this place is linked to an orphan trading syndicate, and to save the children, Mask takes the stage and obtains a new mask and outfit, unleashing more power than ever to become the hero they need. Travis also passes along that in addition to trafficking children, Curtis also has special arrangements with the US government to live with several female orphans, and a man named Pedro is the middleman who also controls the organ trade routes. He adds that years ago, Pedro, Curtis, and Dan were all working together at the Seattle Self-Defense Department, secretly laundering dirty money and transferring it offshore. However, Pedro got too greedy, keeping a little for himself, and framed Dan for it, tricking Curtis into killing him. From a fallen angel, Dan receives a new weapon, the Demon Gun, and in the parking lot, Smith faces off against the anime-masked magical girl killer, Ayame Blackburn. Though Smith wins the duel, Ayame steps away into the shadows, proceeding to get away with a bus full of kidnapped children. Elsewhere, Curtis corners Pedro at a gym, here to kill him, and as Pedro begs for his life, Curtis shows him the dead bodies of his family just outside. He adds how he raped Pedro's wife and cut off the heads of his son and daughter, asking how many children Pedro himself killed. He tosses him the head of his daughter as proof, and as Pedro clutches it in anger and grief, Curtis wastes no time in executing him. At the same time, Garcine and Mills arrive at the Blackburn residence, sickened at discovering the remains of a child in the trunk of a car. Finding the fairground bus and Heaven Smile here too, they find Travis, who shares Pedro and Curtis had a falling out when Heaven Smile started reducing the amount of fresh organs coming in, and so Pedro tried to cut Curtis out of orphan trafficking and control everything himself. Intercepting another of Johnny's pigeons, they learn the brief bloody history of all the killers supporting the Smith Syndicate as remnant psychs, including some killed by Smith. Each a monster in their own right, what they have in common is that they also consider other psychos fair game. Exploring further, Travis mentions Ayame is actually a recent girl Curtis took in and trained to be a killer, and still choosing only to retain girls, as all of the bodies in the back are of kidnapped boys only. They also run into the spirit of Omeda, who remarks how similar they both are before also passing on. They face off against the masked Ayame again, and this time succeeding gunning her down and cutting her assassination lifestyle short. Eager to tie up an old loose end himself, Dan faces down his former partner and teacher, who is pleased to see how strong Dan has gotten. Deciding to settle things fairly, they agree upon a quick draw contest, as Dan overcomes his past to win the duel. Sending a dying Curtis to be harvested by the machines he used against his victims, Dan leaves, noting the piles of bodies Curtis built now capped by one final addition. Returning to his trailer house, Garcia now sees Samantha gleefully kicking Harmon, while on television a show about the 9-member superhero team, the Punishing Rangers, Handsome Men, is interrupted by a newsflash about a Democratic congressman being assassinated. What more, the killers were dressed like the superheroes Handsome Men, and stranger still, the assassination was declared in a recent Handsome Men comic and reflected in their online game. The government believes the comic book writer Trevor Pearl Harbor is actually orchestrating the hits and so want him taken out. Even more interesting, the most recent comic actually targets Harmon Smith, declaring their next mark to be killer7. Taking this very seriously, Garcian heads the Pearl Harbor studio in the Dominican Republic, and Iwazaru brings up that Heaven Smile has reached calamity status worldwide. Navigating the maze-like streets of a lost city while collecting colored keys, Smith encounters an odd pair of twin boys with the voice of an old man speaking of the light and dark. Travis now touches down, revealing Pearl Harbor is actually able to see the future, and puts it down in his comics, and meeting the spirit of Curtis, he says being killed by Dan was a wish of his, and passes on, looking forward to seeing him in hell. Matching each of the keys to each of the 9 handsome men, Dan walks in on Pearl Harbor just as the artist already foresaw. Likewise, he also foresaw the arrival of the handsome men themselves, who turn out to indeed be assassins here to clash with the killer7. As the fight ensues, Handsome Black keeps Dan on his toes as he fires one of his deadly beams, which misses Dan but hits and instantly kills Pearl Harbor. Quickly closing the gap, Dan gets under the Ranger and reduces their team count down 1 member. The remaining 8 Handsome Men now make their appearance, swearing revenge for Handsome Black, but declaring their team duel will take place in Broadway, New York. Making their signature entrance, the Handsome Men appear in style, impressing Khan, as even Harmon takes the field to even the score to an 8v8 team battle between assassins, mirroring their weapons. Leading things off, Harmon rolls up against Handsome Red, who decides to also battle in a wheelchair, but the seasoned veteran easily seizes the first win with 1 shot. Next, Khan faces down Handsome White Pearl, but the hooligan is somehow outsped and loses. Coyote sizes up Handsome Gold for the 3rd match and steals another win for the team. For the 4th match, Coyote fights Handsome Light Brown but is unable to overtake her. Kevin then tries to tie things up against Handsome Dead, but his knives are unable to make the cut. Next, Dan takes on Handsome Blue in a quick draw contest, winning and quickly tying up the score again. In the 7th bout, Mask handles Handsome Purple, but Mask is somehow outmatched and outmasked. However, as he falls, Mask discovers a new power within that goes even further beyond, powering up and blowing away the purple foe. Then, for the final match, Garcian stares down Handsome Pink, but she quickly transforms into her normal form, and Garcian quickly identifies her as a gamer girl, figuring that she is somehow using the illegal internet to control the real world. She introduces herself as Love Wilcox and has been making propaganda for Electro Inline Incorporated, who really killed Pearl Harbor, and tells him she intends to make them pay. Shaking hands to resolve things, Garcian smiles, saying her passion is an inspiration to them all, before she warps away in a beam of light. At this time, the credits for the popular video game by Capcom, killer7 Online, plays out, featuring killer7 and Handsome Men, as Kunlan reaches out to turn off the game. A year now passes since Japan's destruction, as we see Matsuoka fix up Kasai in an embarrassing manner and force him to fall to his death for his involvement in Japan's ruin. Back in the trailer house, Garcia discovers the raped and murdered body of Samantha, as elsewhere in the Forbidden Room, Harmon is having a chess match against Kunlan, and Kunlan tells a short story. There once was a bright young man who was an amazing athlete and scholar, had a wonderful girlfriend, and had so many opportunities before him. Yet he felt empty and unsatisfied, crying and praying at night to God for help. One night, his mother tried to seduce him, and snapping, the boy would stab his mother with unrecognizable brutality. Kunlan states this must have been an angel's work, and Harmon says more like a Hell's Angel, and Kunlan shrugs. Just then, both are startled and alarmed to see Garcian just standing silently to the side before leaving quietly. Later, going out to meet Mills, Mills informs him the remaining political parties are beginning to make their move and Japan will likely enact some sort of new terrorism to shake the United States. He asks Garcia to go to Philadelphia and meet a former aide to the leader of the UN party, Matsuoka, for more information. Really, he is actually the only remaining member of that party, yet has now amassed over 10 million secret Japanese members scattered around the world. Garcia surmises that if they ever gathered in one state, they could organize one bloc and earn the seat of a state. Garcia now brings up that Harmon has suddenly disappeared, and nervous, Mills says he has something important to tell Garcia about Harmon from 30 years ago, but is suddenly shot several times by a sniper. Staying calm, Garcia bails out and escapes, proceeding with the mission at Union Hotel in Philadelphia and finding it overrun with Heaven's Smile. Iwasaru confirms it all to be a trap, and the spirit of Handsome Black is happy to see Killer7 pay for all the crimes they committed as he passes on. They even meet the spirit of Mills, who accepts his death as part of the job and is strangely glad he died like in a movie with a bullet-riddled body. He now tells them the nation's voting system is the key, and he dug too deep learning more about how state elections are controlled, promising to tell them more later. Travis now meets them, asking the Smiths if they remember this hotel, and further on, Garcia walks into a dark room, only to be informed by two mysterious men that Matsuoka has already been handed over. They wave him away in the direction of another informant who can tell him where, and he goes off to meet with a woman at the same spot Mills was killed. She introduces herself as Linda Vermillion, the assassin who killed Mills for knowing too much and regards herself as a protector of the country. She hands Garcia his next assignment, but warns him to decipher how the system works and who are the real enemies. Directed at Coburn Elementary School, Travis is there, informing him this is where the Homeland's elections originated as the primaries for the first presidential election. As it turns out, the first president was the principal of this school. They intercept one last message from Johnny to Amir, wherein he declares his intent to kill Amir, as Harmon is apparently with him alongside his maid, and he'll be coming to the school personally. However, the letter is suddenly cut off by Samantha, now calling herself a Smith, who relays Harmon is waiting for them at the hotel, knowing they are reading this. Discovering the ultimate mask of strength, the Iron Mask, Mask finally attains its final form and is able to break down even the most solid of doors. Travis then mentions that the first president exposed a new technique to alter the vote counts, and the state of Washington is 10% of the total vote, making it a key state and a crucial one to control. Finally arriving at the principal's office, Garcia meets Benjamin Keene, who invites him in a game of Russian roulette, saying that if Garcia wins, then he'll teach him the technique to hit on women with 100% success, but if he loses, Garcia must kill the president. Accepting those equal terms, Garcia is stone cold while he plays, and as the game progresses, Keene sees he is about to lose. Angry that he loses his chance to become president, Keene spits out that women are all the same, as he pulls the trigger and shoots himself. Afterwards, Travis reveals that Harmon is linked to this school, and finding an odd engraving, a cut suddenly opens up on Garcia's forehead. The spirit of Keene now appears to tell him the UN party and opposition party are meeting, and urges Garcia to take out the young members of the UN party and bury the dark pages of history. Finding a terminal that deciphers the strange engraving, it holds security intended for Amir, and beyond, he finds a large man hanged in the gymnasium. Garcia is held up at gunpoint by Matsuoka himself, who explains the presidential election is in the hands of the Education Ministry, who in turn manipulates the votes and chooses the next leader. The hanging man is the former chairman of the Education Ministry, but leaves for now, saying there are more important things to worry about, like figuring out who Garcia is. Looking up, Garcia sees a picture of Harmon among the former principals of the school, but the dead body comes to life somehow, interrupting him. Powerful black smiles take down each of the Smiths one by one until it's just Garcia left. Shooting off the hanging man's pants, the man is shot in the crotch until he drops his golden gun, and Garcia picks it up, using it to finish off the Smiles and large man before leaving the school. Reviewing cassette tapes left behind in the investigation, Garcia learns about an FBI agent named Holbert on a case from the Electoral Justice Committee, looking into a connection with this school and the presidential election. As he found out, the school itself actually harbors dozens of thousands of criminals and delinquent students, including a particular boy named Amir Parkreiner. Strangely, the boy's birth year is allegedly 1942, over 50 years ago, but his DNA analysis doesn't match his parents, on top of a death record for Amir in 1952. In addition, this school is controlled by another country, as all students here are trained to work for the US government, getting jobs upon graduation, though some are recruited as Yakumo party members. As members, they infiltrate key areas of the country's infrastructure and manipulate it for the sake of Japan. Unfortunately, Holbert is killed by Yakumo's ace, Amir, before more is shared. Looking for answers, Garcia returns to Union Hotel, where he now sees the sites of several murders and sees a vision of the assassination of Kevin, Khan, Mask, and Kaede. He meets Mills, who finally reveals the results of his investigation, in which most ballot booths are in schools, and the Education Ministry is in charge of the schools. He makes it clear the results of the presidential election are rigged from the start, public voting is just for show, and always has been, as the ministry manipulates votes before they are counted. As such, the most powerful man in the country is actually the education secretary. However, even exposing that ugly truth won't change anything. Later, he sees the murder of Coyote as well, and himself talking to Dan, who calls Garcian the Bloody Heartland, as Dan loses a quick draw and is killed by Garcian. Distraught to learn he is the one who originally killed the other members of the Killer 7, Garcian is met by Mills again, who is surprised to see Garcian cry for the first time. As his path leads once again to the two men in the dark, one man says it's now time to call Garcian by his real name, Amir Parkreiner, while introducing himself as Harmon Smith alongside his bodyguard 3 Eyes. He also confirms Garcian was the one who killed the 6 people in the hotel years ago when he was just a 13-year-old boy named Amir. Amir was about to kill the 7th Smith, but later the body of the leader was found in a school safe. Dubbed the Killer 7, this incident was never made public as it involved national security issues. As a young Harmon looks at him, he tells Amir there is also something supernatural about him, and Garcian leaves to contemplate this truth. Elsewhere in the Forbidden Room, Old Harmon plays chess again with Kun Lan, as both turn to see a new visitor. Old Harmon recognizes the visitor, saying it's been a long time, as both Old Harmon and Kun Lan are thoroughly gunned down and killed on the spot. Meanwhile, on the roof of the hotel, Garcian is shocked to find a young manifestation of himself, complete with an actual third eye that has been the source of his powers. Amir shoots himself and dies, and stunned, Garcian is still in denial. He opens up the large case he's been carrying with him the entire time, and within he is shocked to acknowledge that there never were 7 assassins. They were all just personas absorbed and manifested by Amir, including Garcian himself. As 3 years pass, a fully awakened Amir travels to Battleship Island, a halfway point between the US and Japan, as he meets Matsuoka, who presents him with a choice. Behind him is the very last of the Heaven Smile, the final boss, and if they end it, they end all of terrorism. However, with the Smile gone, there's also no need for Killer 7 anymore. But leave him and the Smile alive, and he promises to get his revenge for Japan. Contemplating this, Amir checks behind the door, finding not only Old Harmon unconscious on the ground, but beyond is Iwazaru, the true final Smile. Killing him, Amir looks behind his mask to reveal it was Kun Lan this entire time. As the game ends, a century passes, as now in Shanghai, Harmon and Kun Lan are reborn yet again, dueling yet again, as Kun Lan states that the world doesn't change, all it does is turn, ready to continue their endless waltz. Killer 7 has enjoyed the success of selling over 160,000 copies worldwide.